When Ridley was first talking about the idea of having this human figure representing the space jockey character, we all pretty much hated it. You know, he was very confident about this. He was not going. No one was going to change his mind.
Welcome back to our Part 3 coverage of the film Prometheus. In Parts 1 and 2, we covered all of the Jon Spaihts original scripts and how the studio started turning those scripts into a different story. So if you don't know about those events, you might want to go back and watch those first. As Fox encouraged Ridley Scott to keep changing his intended Alien prequel to become a different type of film, they began suggesting writers, and Scott humored them by meeting with several. Finally, Scott sent the script out to Damon Lindelof, who he liked as a writer. Spaihts was a bit bummed by being replaced, and later said,
I think, frankly, that he was brought aboard because at the time that I was working on that script, I'd never had a movie produced, and in the view of a studio head, untested. It really happened when we were in the very home stretch. Like, we think we're ready to go, and the studio had two thoughts. They were like, let's dial back the alien monsters and lean more on the engineers, and let's get a known writer on this and bring it home. Which, of course, I didn't love, but which, as an unproduced writer at that time, I had been told to expect from the very beginning, so I wasn't that surprised.
At the time, Lindelof was still working on Lost, and he stated he was an Alien fan who had already heard that Scott was making a prequel. He stated he was counting the days to see it in theaters like every other fan, and he was stunned he was called by Ridley. After their initial phone call, a script was delivered to Lindelof within an hour, and the courier waited outside his house until he was finished reading the script, and then that script was returned back to the studio. After reading the script, Lindelof said this, "So when I finished it, I went into my office and I wrote an email to Ridley and his producing partners, and this response was basically my job interview. I wrote maybe 4 or 5 paragraph email saying, here are the things I love about it. I think there are some incredible set pieces here. I love the fundamental idea behind the movie. I feel like it's a cool think piece, but I think it's relying a bit too heavily on the alien stuff that we've seen now 5 or 6 times in different movies. Chest bursting and face hugging and xenomorphs. And I just feel that your idea is so strong and the characters can be made so strong that we don't need any of that stuff. That isn't to say that this isn't the movie that should be set in that universe, but I look at it more like a story that is running parallel to the original Alien. So that if there was a sequel to this movie, it would not be Alien, it would be Prometheus 2, and then Prometheus 2 is parallel to Aliens. And here's how we could do that. And so I sent that email, and I got into bed. The next day, Lindelof was invited to meet Ridley at his production company, and they talked more. Damon stated he wanted to keep a lot of things in Spaihts' script, but if he was hired, he would diminish the alien stuff. He also stated he saw Prometheus as a Blade Runner alien mashup, in that he would focus on the character Wayland more, and he would be like on a Roy Batty journey in that he was looking for his creator too. Thus, instead of an android seeking longer life, it would be a human, thus flipping that narrative. Anyone alive knows how Ridley has a fetish for his androids, so I'm sure that pitch impressed Ridley. When the pitch was over, Ridley asked him to pitch it to the studio. He did, and the studio liked the idea. Originally, his rewrite polish job was to be 6 weeks, but it would later turn into a year job. And on top of this, Lindelof would grab more power by becoming an executive producer on the film as well. Right after the announcement occurred that Lindelof was replacing Spaihts, commentators were spouting the narrative that that guy that ruins Lost was taking the Alien prequel away from Spaihts. And this is immediately what Lindelof did to get ahead of that narrative.
And I wrote John an email. We didn't know each other prior to this process, both before that announcement and after that announcement. Dude, that is not what is happening here. Yeah. You are, if I do my job right, I'm not trying to collapse any of the foundation that you built. I think it's awesome, and hopefully we'll end up sharing a screenplay credit, but that's not for us to decide.
When Lindelof was brought in, the same pattern continued as it did with Spaihts between July to August 2010. Lindelof would come in and talk with Ridley, get a feel for what Ridley wanted for about 3 hours a day, and then he would insert their talks into his script. The spine of Spaihts' story remained the same, and Lindelof would either add things to it or remove them under Ridley's approval. The best way to describe the process between the writer and director is to hear from the man himself.
And it's not about me coming in and saying, hey Ridley, I've got this great idea, do you want to direct it? It's about him saying, I want to direct a movie in this universe, here's what I want it to be about, here are the ideas that excite me, here are the thematics that I'm interested in, and here are the character traits that I want to demonstrate. And it's not to reduce the process of screenwriting, but I feel like in film, which is much different than what I did in TV, it is a little bit like Mad Libs.
In the end, Lindelof said, I have great pride in my own lack of authorship in the movie, and I feel like if the movie is a huge success, it's all because of Ridley Scott, and if the movie is not a success, it's all because I wasn't able to execute his vision successfully. We mention this quote because there are a lot of folks who will say that Lindelof ruined Prometheus. But the bottom line was, it was Ridley's film. The director steered the writers, so it's not fair to just single out Lindelof for the many mistakes in this final film. You also need to remember that the studio was actively involved in changing the core direction of the film, and we don't know whatever other influences Fox had in the picture. To push this point home, it was Ridley who wanted to leave the film more ambiguous, and he liked the idea of it semi-resembling a mystery box. In meetings, Lindelof would even bring this up. Ridley, I'm still eating shit a year after Lost is over for all the things we didn't directly spell out. Are you sure you want to do this? And he said, I would rather have people fighting about it and not know than spell it out. That's just more interesting to me. Maybe that's why he sought me out in the first place. As the draft moved along, the many titles that were suggested fell away. Damon Lindelof proposed the title Explosion, but then in 2011, Tom Rothman suggested the name Prometheus as it related to something with big ideas, and the title stuck. Lindelof revealed his thoughts on this title and the type of story he was writing by this quote. Part of the fun of the movie is understanding exactly why we called it Prometheus, and also, it sounds really pretentious, like Inception. So we were just like, yeah, that makes the movie sound really smart. In the middle of September 2010, Lindelof would turn in his first script for Prometheus. He would then continue to polish the script for the next few months. Now, we have a lot to say about the Lindelof scripts, but we'd prefer to get to the film to cover all these things. But quickly after the script was finished, Fox finally greenlit Prometheus to shoot. Thus, stages in Pinewood Studios were reserved and set construction began shortly thereafter. On kind of a side note, on February 16, 2011, H.R. Giger visited the production design department with Scott giving him a tour of the pictures. Giger was happy with what he saw, and he even sent Ridley some drawings of his own after the fact. But it was honestly too late to use any of Ridley's drawings, as the film was already underway, and things couldn't be changed drastically. Charlize Theron had lunch with Ridley Scott when she first heard about the film. She was interested in playing Shaw, but at the time, she was committed to filming Mad Max Fury Road, so nothing came of that. Later, when Fury Road was delayed again, her schedule opened up, and that's when she signed up for Vickers, since Rapace had already been cast for Shaw. At the time, Michelle Yeoh and Angelina Jolie were possibilities for a Vickers-type character. Theron really liked the idea of playing a real asshole in the movie, and that's why she was interested in the role. When she mentioned she was interested in playing a secondary character, there was a little bit of surprise, because she was a headliner who had won an Academy Award, and normally people of that status didn't play supporting roles. She had conditions, though. If she took the part, she wanted an explanation for why her character was such a jerk in the film. Obviously, her desires were met. Anne Hathaway, Natalie Portman, Carey Mulligan, and Abby Cornish were all considered during the development of the film to play Shaw, but Scott liked what Noomi Rapace did in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. She landed the role in January 2011. After getting the part, she wrote a complete backstory for her character, which stated that that Shaw didn't care about beauty and grew up as a missionary's daughter in South Africa. She worked with a dialect coach very closely to get her English accent right. For the role of Holloway, James Franco was considered, but Logan Marshall Green, who worked mainly on stage, was sent the script because there was interest in him. After he was given the script to read, he knew up front that the character they were looking for him to play was Holloway. As he kept reading, he was bummed his character died. But as he kept reading, he realized that the script he was reading was an Alien prequel, so he went for it. Max von Sydow and Rutger Hauer were the first choices for Peter Weyland, but then scenes were concocted when David would visit Weyland in his dreams when he was young. So Scott decided he needed someone young to play that part, and they would put him in old makeup later. Guy Pearce would land this role, and he quickly began studying elderly folks and how they moved to get his motions right for the film. Rafe Spall wanted to play Holloway, and he was used for screen tests with Noomi Rapace, playing both David and Holloway. Eventually, he was given the role of Milburn by Ridley Scott. For David, Michael Fassbender was chosen. After getting the part, he did not study alien androids. Rather, he studied Blade Runner androids and HAL 9000 from 2001. While studying Blade Runner, he especially focused on Rachel, played by Sean Young, as Fassbender thought Young's longing for a soul in that movie interested him. In time, David would become a melding of T.E. Lawrence and David Bowie. It was announced publicly that Fassbender got the part in January 2011. For the giant engineer in the film, Ian White was an easy pick, as he played various Predators in both Alien vs. Predator films. When everyone was cast, they had to sign secrecy clauses and were only allowed to read the script at Ridley's production office, because there was paranoia that the script could eventually be leaked online. In fact, security was so tight that only one exception was made. A security courier was flown to an actor's foreign location and literally stood guard for 2 hours while the screenplay was read. When the script was finished, the courier was flown back with that script, and that was the only time an exception was made. After casting, everyone showed up for costume fittings in March 2011. Everyone was tested with designs and given adjustments. At the time, Noomi had blondish hair and suggested it be turned red. Ridley was against the idea, but then she put on a red wig, and Ridley immediately changed his mind, as Rapace was striking as a redhead. For Charlize Theron, the Vickers business suit struck her, and she noted that her character was all about that suit, and it sucked her into character. During this period, actors would go through 5 or 6 fittings, with adjustments, until their costumes were fully selected and mapped out. Alongside casting, Mark Streitenfeld was hired as the composer for the film. Mark worked with Ridley on American Gangster and Robin Hood, and he began writing ideas for the score after he read the script before filming ever started. Filming began on March 21, 2011, and was to last 82 days at Pinewood Studios in England, with exterior shots in Iceland and Scotland. Later, filming would move to an audiovisual complex in Alicante, Spain. At the soundstage, the film was titled Paradise. During filming, Jon Spaihts would visit the set for just 2 days, and on those days, they were filming the interior of the Land Rovers and Holloway dying. At the end of the shoot, Scott had not filmed the Isle of Skye scene, as he thought they didn't need to show them excavating, but then during reshoots, he would change his mind and film it suddenly, because he felt some setup for the expedition was needed. In the end, the film cost around $120 to $130 million, and there is little to report about the filming, as it was relatively a smooth shoot, with Ridley Scott having complete control and no one to get in his way. He had complete power over this film, and that was both a good and a bad thing. After doing some quick pickup scenes, Scott was now faced with the decision of making the film R or PG-13. It's not that the studio demanded Scott do this. However, the director was considering studio needs and wanted Prometheus to be as successful as it could. At first, Scott requested the film be a very hard R before he started filming, but he would soon soften that approach. The question is, do you go for the PG-13 or do you go for what it should be, which is R? Financially, it makes quite a difference. Essentially, it's kinda R. It's not just about blood. It's about ideas that are very stressful. The decision to finally roll out the film as rated R did not occur until May 7th, 2012. 24 days before the film released, and many, like myself, were gratified that it was rated R. On November 27, 2011, a bootlegged low-quality teaser trailer for Prometheus was leaked online. Fox was pretty upset about this and quickly reacted. They took down the trailer, but like all things on the internet, it resurfaced. To respond to this, Fox rushed out their trailer within 30 days, releasing it on December 22, 2011. At this time, a poster was also available to theaters for display. We can't go over the marketing without discussing the debate that confused audiences, and that was whether Prometheus was a prequel or not. Around December 2011, Josh Horowitz from MTV had a conversation with CEO of Fox, Tom Rothman. The conversation about the trailer being leaked online for Prometheus was a big part of that conversation, and Rothman lamented how unfair that was because the trailer was meant to be seen on screen. But then the conversation changed to Josh asking if the film was a prequel, and the discussion went like this. You're saying it's an Alien prequel. It's not. Hand on heart. It has the continuity with the other Alien films. It takes place before, so it's a prequel. Well, I suppose if you're going to define it in that way, then most movies are too. This was just the start, because once Damon Lindelof joined the project, the entire direction of the film, for better or worse, had notably shifted, and that didn't mean it was just because of Damon Lindelof being there. You have to understand that films generate a PR machine, and everyone is supposed to be in lockstep. Scott often used the phrase alien DNA when describing the movie. Instead of accepting that he was making an alien prequel, he would often make it vague. The keen fan will recognize strands of aliens' DNA, so to speak, but the ideas tackled in this film are unique, large, and provocative. The last 8 minutes of Prometheus' story evolve into a pretty good DNA of the alien one. Ridley would religiously stick to his guns, and it caused a little confusion because fans didn't know what he meant. It was like watching a Lost episode, trying to figure out what the story was about that week. And don't get me wrong, I actually like Lost. I like thought-provoking stuff, but that last season just didn't do it for me. But the Prometheus approach to mystery boxing is correlative, because Scott trusted Lindelof to steer his film's story in that way. And the truth is, Lindelof is a writer who thinks confusion and subversion is entertainment, and therefore uses pretentious terms to define his work. And what do you know? The words DNA was used by Lindelof in his past works before Prometheus. Time travel has been in the show's DNA from the beginning. The audience is prepared to go on that journey with us. The talk of DNA would soon turn into a crusade to peg Prometheus as its own unique and distant project rather than embrace its alien origins, which honestly was a huge mistake for the film's marketing, because in time it would only cause confusion and later frustration with some of the film's audience. In time, DNA was a word even used by performers, like a repetitive mantra. There is a gray and non-specific between her and another character, and it plays into DNA, and it plays into how much of her was given to create this other character. Even more misdirection with the audience occurred when the script, known as Alien Harvest, with Jon Spaihts' name under the title, was leaked, suggesting it was an early Prometheus script, which it wasn't. It was debated whether it was real or not for some time, but then on July 31st, 2011, Spaihts came forward and stated, "I have neither written nor read Alien Harvest, despite the charming addition of my name to the cover page. Despite all the aversions to Prometheus being an Alien prequel, audiences were not buying it, and it was always a constant debate pushed on the internet, and when cast and crew were in public, you were guaranteed they'd be asked about it, because their trailer showed the folly of their narrative. In that trailer, the music from the original 1979 Alien promotions was front and center, setting the tone. The same title reveal was also used. The sound of comms was utilized at the beginning as well. And let's not forget the images of the engineer, the Juggernaut ship, and the flight chair. The truth is, everyone knew the movie was a prequel, and it was obvious, but these narrative games and mystery boxes only agitated people. The audience felt toyed with.
The other thing is, this is a prequel to Alien. And
don't call it prequel.
Yeah,
they
don't call it a comeback.
It's
a prequel.
It is.
He can deny it as much as he wants. This is a prequel to Alien.
All this confusion was pointless, because the truth is the filmmakers were not embracing Alien. Rather, they were dismissing it, and when the film came out, it would have most likely had a better following if they embraced the prequel narrative, rather than frustrate those die-hard fans who knew it was. To help propel hype for the movie, Fox released shorts leading up to the film, starting with a TED Talk to kind of promote the film imaginatively. These shorts were actually Damon Lindelof's idea, according to him.
And I was like, we should do a TED Talk with Wayland, and it'll be, if we can talk Guy into it, we don't have to do a full 18-minute TED Talk, but we can talk about some of the themes of the movie, but it'll be like in the future.
The first video released had Wayland, young, powerful, arrogant, and speaking at a TED Talk. The video was released on February 28th, 2012, and by the end of the video, he hubrisly states that mankind are now gods because they can create artificial life.
We can create cybernetic individuals, which leads to an obvious conclusion. We are the gods now.
This short is cool for continuity, but really doesn't add anything to the film. Ridley wanted to do a short with Noomi Rapace because he saw her as the star of the film, but the studio wasn't sold on the idea, as they didn't see her as a selling point or as a star for the movie. So Lindelof wrote dialogue for her to sell her find to Wayland, and Ridley filmed it anyways. In this video, she incessantly calls Wayland about her find in the Isle of Skye. In it, she spouts off her doctoral qualifications and her faith-based view of the world.
Do you feel that all the science in the world will never give us the answers we really want? I believe there's a place where every one of those questions could be answered. I believe I know where that place is.
Happy Birthday, David is probably the best of the promos, as it's like a commercial to actually entice buyers to requisition a David droid.
I understand human emotions, although I do not feel them myself.
The Prometheus transmission has some great moments, with Janek expressing his no-nonsense demeanor.
I don't like that. Take that off me, please. So how tall are you, Captain Yannick? Captain Yannick, you can't smoke in here, Captain Yannick.
And Holloway trying to be a showboat. There was also a Prometheus website. Fans could go to the site for all kinds of information, including a timeline of Wayland Industries. The site no longer exists today. When Prometheus came out, there was a lot of merchandise ready to go. The standard t-shirts and posters were available, and so was the CD soundtrack. Besides this, there was also a book called Prometheus, The Art of the Film, which has countless concept photos and the story behind that process. Also released a few months after the movie came out were NECA Prometheus figures. The first series had an engineer and an engineer in a chair suit. As Prometheus neared its release date, The Avengers was storming the box office. It was a huge event and a film celebrated by die-hard fans and average moviegoers alike. For the week of May 18th, What to Expect When You're Expecting released with Cameron Diaz, Jennifer Lopez, Anna Kendrick, Dennis Quaid, and Chris Rock. Hasbro hoped that their adapted board game film Battleship would make a dent in the box office. But with a $220 million budget before marketing, the film only made $303 million worldwide. Also this week was the sports drama Crooked Arrows, which only made $1.8 million. On May 25th, another big film released, Men in Black 3, alongside the coming-of-age film Moonrise Kingdom and Chernobyl Diaries. The week before Prometheus released, the theaters were quiet, with only one major film being released, Snow White and the Huntsman. On June 8th, 2012, DreamWorks did not see Prometheus as a threat because they knew that their film did not demand an adult movie-going audience. So they smartly parked Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted, right next to Prometheus, giving families a film to choose while they waited for the upcoming Disney Brave film. Then there was Colin Trevorrow's directing debut with Safety Not Guaranteed. Though Prometheus wanted to come in at the first spot, it was relegated to the second spot. But Prometheus was no slouch, making 68.6 on its first week. On June 15th, 2012, Rock of Ages released, making $38.5 million. With it was Adam Sandler's comedy That's My Boy and Your Sister's Sister. During this week, Prometheus held the second spot, which was expected, but there was a clear sense of foreboding because the movie dropped 56.5% of its revenue in 1 week, making $29.8 million. This trend would continue the following weeks as Prometheus dropped another 50% in its box office, thus dropping to the fourth spot with $14.7 million. During the week of June 22nd, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, Seeking a Friend for the End of the World, To Rome with Love, and the new box office blockbuster Brave opened. What was shocking was how fast Prometheus fell. Just after 4 weeks at the box office, Prometheus, Ridley Scott's return to science fiction, but not Alien, fell to the 9th spot, losing another 50% of its ticketed sales for the 4th week in a row. This week's drop was a result of all the big films released on June 29th, the first being the introduction of the funny and crude Ted, and Medea's Witness Protection Program that showed Medea had no problem standing up against the mob. Magic Mike hit big too, eventually making $113.7 million. Then there was People Like Us with Chris Pine. Finally, The Amazing Spider-Man would top the box office for the final week of Prometheus's top 10 appearance. After this week, Prometheus would never return to the top 10 and dropped off the charts fast. On its 5th week at the box office, it made just $2.7 million, dropping 66% of its ticket sales. The speed at which this movie came out and went was shocking in comparison to the event the film should have been. In the end, it would make $126.4 million domestically, $276.8 internationally, and finally $403.3 million worldwide. When the film came out, there were lots of critics who cheered for the film.
This is a wholly original film that exists in the same world as Alien, but you can't go into it with your own expectations. This is a movie that is, in my opinion, a fantastic science fiction film. This is an excellent movie. It has a lot of things to say.
So while yes, it may be a different film, it is still very much a sci-fi epic. And if you are an Alien fan, you should still enjoy it for what it is.
Then there were some that panned it.
As much as I really didn't love this movie, and as much as I thought it was ponderously lightweight, I still enjoy seeing sci-fi think pieces, and I hope they make another one.
You know what? Unless there is some super awesome director's cut of this film just disappointed me in every possible way that a sci-fi geek born and raised in the 80s could be disappointed. And I am just... Ridley, I did not get what I was looking for. I did not get what I was sold. I can see why you didn't want this to come off as a straight up sequel or straight up prequel, because it does not satisfy me as a prequel at all.
Wow.
While others were just frustrated because the discussion was so extreme.
Then, of course, Prometheus arrived. And in the course of its opening weekend, it went from being the most anticipated to the most disappointing film of the year. Loads and loads of people getting in touch saying, I hope you're including Prometheus in your worst of the year. It's such a letdown. It really disappointed me. How could a film for which I had such great expectations have let me down so badly?
They're clearly, this is why I have a problem with them saying, oh, it's not a prequel. Maybe it is. No, it's not. Oh, it is a prequel because there are elements in there that they're trying, if you ask me, trying too hard to link up, to explain the history of what we see in these later films. Don't bullshit me and saying that this is something on it. No, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the marketing.
Well,
the space jockeys. The derelict ships, and what you find out where they are. They're trying to give a history to something that we see, even to the point of like actually ending the movie with a shot of the alien itself. That's bullshit that you can't say that you can, oh, this is something that's on its own. No, it is not.
Clearly, it's a prequel in as much as it's a story in that universe that comes before, but it's not like it's the movie that comes, the story that happens right before Alien.
I know that, but
once again, it doesn't make it not a prequel if it doesn't.
No, I'm saying, that is a prequel.
While others turned the film into a joke.
If we share the same DNA with the engineers that created us, why do other life forms on Earth not share the same DNA? The engineers landed on Earth and created life on Earth, and how come there was 65 million years of dinosaurs before us? Why would the last engineer waste his time hunting down Shaw and Charlize Theron when he could have just flew his ship away and completed his mission? How did those two guys get lost in the caves when the ship had an elaborate 3D map and were tracking their every move and they were in constant communication with the ship?
I think the best take on the film was Jeremy Jahns when he said,
you go from liking the movie to not liking the movie so many times, you walk out going, did I like it or did I not?
Pretty much every critic that spoke about the film sounded the same two agreements, whether good or bad, and that was the film's visuals. They also stated that it had compelling subject matter, but after those 2 points, the gloves were off. The cons kept bringing up confusion with the subject matter and the stupidity of the characters, while the pros just overlooked such things. It was a divisive discussion, but honestly, it wasn't weaponized division like Disney would later do with Star Wars. The majority of people were allowed to discuss their different views on the film and then relax and talk about something else without being called names or being accused of being something. As for me, I was working at a dead-end job when this movie came out, and I was raising 4 children who were not yet teens. I made sure to have the day off when this film came out, and someone was watching the kids. At first, I was stunned by the sights the film showed. I couldn't believe Ridley stepped back into the alien universe. It seemed like a gift. But then, the crew arrived at LV-223. And this is where we're going to end this video. In our next video, we're going to go in the movie in detail. And one of the things we're going to do in that video is look at, in detail, who was responsible for what changes in this film, so we can figure out what went wrong and what went right. Until then, sit back and have a drink with a fan, whether they agree or disagree with you. Just be careful what kind of drink they serve you.
You put your finger on that drink. I'm not drinking that.
And please, if you think we're worthy, support us on Patreon, where $3.50 a month will get you early access to videos and updates on channel projects. With that said, we'll see you soon. If you like what you see here, click like and subscribe. Super thanks helps, and so does sharing. We'll see you next time.